Fear not, you worm, Jacob. We need to be aware that we are creatures. This breath I have no right to. If only we knew the bliss of not owning, we would be free. The Lord has this puzzling passage with regard to John the Baptist. Exegists have pondered over its meaning over the Christian centuries, and it was already picked up by the monastic East, very close to the origin in the spirituality of the desert. John the Baptist, in a sense the first Christian monk, certainly looked up to and back to by all the monks of Christianity. And with him the whole school of prophets, for Elijah and Elisha are of the same ilk, the still small voice, the Holy Mount, the perception of what can't be heard easily in the midst of noise. Alas, Advent is one of the noisiest of seasons, and it should be a reproduction of the desert of John the Baptist if it were to do its work on the soul. We miss Christ in trying to prepare his feast, do we not? From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and men of violence take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And in the same passage we have this great declaration: truly I say to you, among those born of women there has risen no one greater than John the Baptist. And yet he is the last of the old, and has not yet therefore the fullness. Yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. The Desert Fathers pondered over this word. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence. And men of violence take it by force. They saw in this a challenge not to be conceited, not to be spiritually lazy, to see that there was a need for an exertion. Now the word ascetic has that notion. Askein, askeo, is to exercise as would an athlete. It's therefore an exertion of energy and force. One works up a sweat in training. Well, they had that notion in the desert. At La Trappe we had the whole formation, which was a modern form of the desert. On parle, one speaks of the desert of Cîteaux. On parle du désert de Cîteaux. It was a desert place created by monks who would be apart from the world, and where no noise of the world would penetrate. Only God, and the vocal cords were consecrated to his praise, and any other use of them was excluded. A channeling of energy. Remember, when I was in formation, being asked to prepare a paper on silence. It was part of the understanding of the just voted in new constitutions of the Trappist order. But we had at our disposition the old books, and so one could see the new and the old, and I pulled out those bits that precisely indicated the huge advantage of the channeling of energy in praise alone. All the sins of the tongue and all the energy that went with it were just excluded. Desert. Desert of words. There are too many words in our life. We can't hear the word. And so they took this seriously in the desert, and as our novice master put it, they set up records, on se battait des records. One went to the extreme of fasting. And I remember actually my confessor, Don Lucien, who was the prior, saying how he had known those fathers who had this notion of heroic penance, l'émulation. They used to imitate, as it were, the most powerful. And they went to great extremes, even to go beyond the already extreme limits of the rule and constitutions and customs, the usages. Penance. And he, novice master, talked about the different forms of penance and asceticism in the desert. Les dendrites, the dendrites, those who lived in trees. Les troglodytes, those who lived in caves. Les stylites, the stylites, those who lived on pillars. And some would try to be far away by going high and high away from people on their pillar. There were even les moines brouteurs, the monks who would go on all fours, going back to the simplicity of Eden. We may have perhaps the smile of reason because we have grown up and we don't need any of that, do we? And yet we'll go out and put on the smartphone and not realise what we're doing to our souls and how the whole desert is exploded in one flip of the hand. As though we don't need any of that at all. Indeed, it is rather puzzling that some of that has crept even into the inner sanctum, to the monastic cell, which should be the desert for the individual monk, or in the form of la trappe, it would be the desert of silence, a virtual solitude and cell, because no one can enter into one's being, where that has been taken over by what might enter in. The monks might now have access even easily in their inner sanctum to the world by modern gadgets. It starts very quietly on tiptoe and then becomes bit by bit a norm. I know of one new congregation of Canons Regular in the States who have contemporary constitutions drawn up for our time, and there is one passage in them that has this warning, indeed prohibition. Under no circumstances whatsoever is one of the brethren to spend more than a maximum of 4 hours linked to internet. And yet, that's what's happening. All over the world, our desert has been sacrificed to hours and hours linked with the outside world, which is precisely what internet is. Internet. In Welsh, aware, the web. It is like a cobweb over the earth, and we are being caught, unable to wriggle free. Our desert has gone. I will live entangled with the airwaves, which are far more real than my soul, which cannot face the risky business of having nothing but stillness. It's easier to be distracted. I recall actually being warned about this, that it's far more easy to do what's called bricolage, to mess around, fidget around, than to sit still. And it was also a big difference between going through life in interesting readings and going through monastic life in head-on encounter with the Lord in mental prayer. Humanly speaking, we need to have something stimulating and interesting. We can't bear the desert. On this day, back home in Wales, we would feast our local martyr. We had a major relic of his at Gellilodan, where we had the Welsh Mass regularly. Unfortunately, it was decided soon after the change of bishop to remove the relic from there, and it was taken to the Curia, and it was as though the saint protested because the relic started to disintegrate. It had been intact for centuries and had done many miracles, and now it's falling apart into dust or something of the sort. Similar to what happened when the crucifix of St. Antimo was removed by force, and the whole earth began to tremble between it and the museum until it was brought back to St. Antimo. Well, St. John Roberts, who was martyred on this day at Tyburn, hanged, drawn and quartered, was one of those who kept the Benedictine flame alive on the continent and brought it back. But didn't get back as far as Wales. He was caught in the London area. He was actually celebrating the Holy Mass in secret and possibly betrayed, we don't know exactly how. The authorities got wind of it and banged at the door, and he was still at the altar. Open up in the name of the King. Bang, bang, bang. Of course they couldn't stop the celebration, so they banged the door down. He was still in his robes. He got as far as the last gospel. He never interrupted, but he died because he was a priest. The Holy Mass is the centre of our Catholic life. Many died under torture and rack, hanged, drawn and quartered, which if one studies is the horrible punishment of high treason, and is the worst possible they could provide. This was what the Holy Mass meant for them, and we look at our watch and wonder when to be over to get to the real part of the day.